Hey, welcome to Locust Street's DSLR intro course. I'm Darren. This is my studio. Today we're going to go over some of the main priority functions on the dial mode of your DSLR camera. So the main modes we're going to be getting familiar with are aperture priority and shutter speed priority. Probably the most confusing ones out of all of them really, but I'm going to try to make it simple for you. You'll commonly see these modes represented with either an A for aperture priority or an AV for aperture value. And for shutter speed, you'll often just see an S, or sometimes it's represented with a TV, which stands for time value, I believe. One of the most commonly asked questions I get are what do these dial modes actually do? Luckily, I'm here to break it down for you. To really understand what these priority modes are for, we have to take it back one step and actually understand what they're controlling. So, in photography, the combination of your ISO, shutter speed, and aperture will give you a proper exposure. A quick rundown of what those are. Your ISO is how sensitive your camera is to light to begin with. The aperture is the size of the opening inside of your lens. It controls how much light can come in at one time. That also gives you control over the depth of field, which is how many things can be in focus at one time in your shot. You can go from something very narrow, being that your subject is the only thing in focus, or everything in the shot is as crispy as it can possibly be. Your shutter speed is how quickly your camera opens and shuts to let light in. This function controls the appearance of motion in your pictures. A very fast shutter speed and everything is frozen. A slightly longer shutter speed allows light in longer, which often gives you the appearance of motion in your pictures, which sometimes may translate as blur, and other times you may get a light trail of some sort. While both of these functions control how light comes into the camera in one way or another, they have to be balanced out for you to get a proper exposure. In manual, it's your responsibility to do that balancing. With the priority functions, you set the one that's more important for your situation, and you let the camera figure out the rest. Okay, so now to give you an example of when you might want to use some of these dial modes. So for aperture priority, everyday shooting, street photography, portraits, things like that are pretty normal places to use that, especially when your subject is stationary for the most part. It's a good way to get accustomed to maybe varying light situations where you don't have to chase things down. Now, as for your shutter priority, this is better suited for when things that you're trying to shoot may not be entirely stationary. So sporting events of any sort, racing, family events when you're trying to capture kids and they're doing their own thing, perfect for that. A caveat to what you're actually doing when you're using the priority modes. Your main focus is actually trying to adjust the actual exposure, which you'll see as a scale in your camera. You can set the exposure to be slightly underexposed or overexposed, and the camera will compensate for that for you. Now, with that being said, these are great options to use outside in natural light or whatever ambient light you have available. Situations where these might not work as well are in studios or using flashes. That's because the camera actually needs to be able to see the ambient light to be able to give you a proper exposure based off of your settings. With flashes, the light is only present when the camera is taking a picture. So now that we have a basic understanding of what the priority modes are, the other dial modes you have are variations of those things with the added functionality of giving you a scene. So for example, you might see a night mode or portrait mode. Those typically are giving you the same functions by automating those settings, but with the added variable of the camera knowing what scene that the photo is being taken in. For example, there may be a night mode in your camera. The night mode is going to adjust your aperture and shutter speed to have an optimal effect in a lower light setting, versus something like a sport mode, which it'll prioritize your shutter speed to give you the best result. Each of those modes have their own unique quirks to them, and the best thing you can actually do is play around. There's nothing like hands-on experience to really get a handle on all this information. So I'm hoping that this has been useful for you, and I would love to see what you guys are taking. If you post anything online using some of the tips or information you've learned in this video, I'd love to see it. You can use the hashtag #LearnAtLocustStreet. I appreciate you. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Peace.
I like this.